Patience is a trait a lot of us wish to have, but very few people actually have it. Even though we know it is in our best interest to be patient, we just aren't most of the time. So why does that happen in the first place? Imagine you're stuck in traffic, running late for an important meeting. Impatience might lead you to constantly switch lanes, ignore the police officer chasing you, honk aggressively, and feel frustrated. This impulsive behavior didn't do much to improve your situation, and now you are being charged with reckless driving, along with several other charges. What if you were patient? Being patient is not fun, mostly because it goes against everything you want to do. You're keeping in a lot of pent-up frustration that needs to be let out. However, if you were patient in this scenario, you'd acknowledge the delay, you'd stay calm and perhaps try to make the best of the situation and listen to some music or a lecture on why the moon landing is fake and why everyone is a reptilian. The patient individual here suffers less because they have found a way to turn something that is awful into something great. Instead of being frustrated and committing crime, they are being brainwashed, which is at the very least better than jail. Let's say you are learning how to play the violin, and you are pretty shit at it and you know that. Impatience might lead you to rush through practice, and you'll get frustrated because your cat can probably play better than you by not trying at all. This impatience could result in skipping the fundamental techniques, which hinders your progress. A patient approach would be understanding that learning a new skill does take a lot of time, and you'll have to accept that your skills are as good as not playing, if not worse. However, you are willing to practice consistently and blow everyone's eardrums out, break the learning process into manageable steps, and if by some miracle you haven't been kicked out yet, you'll start to actually play decently. It is pretty apparent that being patient is almost better than being impatient in any situation. However, with everything at our fingertips, you have gotten used to getting everything in an instant. You want to listen to your favorite song? Boom, less than 10 seconds. You want to know why no one loves you? Google it and you'll get an answer in less than a second. You want to get rejected by women left, right and center? Download Tinder. Most of the time, we are unwilling to live life at the pace that it actually happens, and we wish for the universe to bend to our will. We want things now, and we want things to change in an instant. A lot of those things are external circumstances like getting people to like you or traffic to move faster. In reality, external circumstances are not up to us. We can't make traffic move faster, nor can we develop a new skill in less than a day. Just to show you how badly impatient we have become, I've found an experiment that will blow your mind. During one of several experiments, participants from a cohort of MBA students at Chicago booth were asked whether they would want to collect a check immediately for a smaller amount or wait 2 weeks to collect a check for a larger amount. More impatient students accepted the check for a lower amount but actually procrastinated cashing the check out for more than 2 weeks. Almost 58% of students who received a smaller check took 3.71 weeks on average to cash the check out, according to the researchers. In order to get a better understanding of impatience, it is important to recognize that impatience is often a reaction to delayed gratification or the perception of slow progress. It typically involves a series of cognitive and emotional responses. So first you have the trigger. This could be anything that triggers the desire for a particular outcome, which creates a sense of urgency and frustration. At a very pathetic attempt to salvage any value you might have left to the crowd, you force some jokes out, none of which land. Here you are looking at the second response, which is immediate discomfort. It is characterized by the obstacles that stand in the way of achieving the desired outcome, which leads to discomfort. In this case, the obstacle being that you are simply not funny. You start to get frustrated and irritated as a result of being faced with the reality that your plush toys probably didn't think you were funny either. This is an emotional response. These emotions are often accompanied with impatience. As a result of this massive failure and embarrassment of yourself on stage, you decide to storm off. The frustration got the better of you. That is the next response of impatience, which is impulsive reactions. So in an attempt to alleviate the discomfort, you'll end up making impulsive actions or decisions which are led by the feeling of frustration, often driven by the desire for a quick solution. You are finally backstage. You are just ashamed of yourself for embarrassing yourself in front of a whole audience. This is the last stage, which is short-term focus. You are focused on the embarrassment and the fact that you are just not funny. Instead, you could think of it as an experience that is going to be beneficial long-term because you have clearly identified your flaws and now you know what to work on so that you can improve that aspect and try again. However, due to impatience setting in, you become too focused on what happened short term that you don't even acknowledge that there could be long-term benefits for what you have just done. So very briefly, the stages are: first you have the trigger, something that triggers the desire for a particular outcome or a result, creating a sense of urgency and frustration. Then you have immediate discomfort, which is practically when the delay or obstacles in achieving the desired outcome lead to discomfort or dissatisfaction. Then you have an emotional response, which is accompanied by emotions such as frustration, irritability, and anxiety. Then you have an impulsive reaction in an attempt to alleviate the discomfort that you feel. To alleviate stage 2, there may be impulsive actions or decisions often driven by a desire for a quick solution. Then lastly, you have short-term focus. Impatience can result in a focus on immediate results rather than considering long-term consequences or a broader perspective. So you're focusing on the short term. Let's say you're working on a project with a tight deadline and progress is slower than you expected due to unforeseen challenges. That's the trigger. Then the delay in meeting the project milestone intensifies the stress, creating a sense of urgency. That's the immediate discomfort. Then the stress turns into impatience, leading to feelings of frustration and anxiety and a strong sense for immediate progress. That is the emotional response. And in an attempt to meet the deadline, you start to hastily make decisions without thorough consideration, which compromises the quality of the work that you're doing. Those are the impulsive reactions. So you see, at first you wanted to present your best work, and now all you're focused on is meeting the immediate deadline. You don't care about the potential benefits of taking the time to address the challenges for a more sustainable long-term solution. That is the short-term focus. Now that you know about the stages, how can you actually recognize them while they're happening, like in the moment? So in order to do that, you'll have to be patient with yourself. It is a gradual process that involves self-awareness and practice. So basically, practice mindfulness, meditation, and make a habit of intentionally slowing down in challenging situations. Now you might be wondering, how do you slow down? What does that look like? You could start with learning something called creative waiting. So take the time to make decisions, obviously not hours, days, or weeks, but give yourself time to assess the situation and keep the urge to jump to conclusions inside. You'll have to wait, assess, and find a solution. You'll also need to know when to stop, because as backwards as this sounds, in order to develop the muscle of patience, you'll want to develop the habit of getting up and just walking away when the allotted time has passed.
Let's say you want to write for 30 minutes.
And when you do write, you're writing for 30 minutes, then the 30 minutes is up. So instead of pushing through and going for like an hour or 2 hours, no, you just stop and get up. As backwards as it sounds, it does help developing the patience muscle. So in the short term, you might think that you're screwing yourself over, which you are in the short term. However, for the long term, you are developing a habit that will keep you coming back and you'll end up producing more over time. Last but not least, learn how to do one thing at a time. As subtle as it is, multitasking is another form of impatience. When you have multiple projects on the go and at the same time, you'll feel as though you have total control of your time and that you're moving at the pace that you need to be moving at. This feeling is just not true, because once a task gets difficult, you'll more often than not bounce off onto the next one. So you're not even going through the difficult parts of the task. As unsexy as this answer is, you'll have to tolerate the anxiety of neglecting everything else on your to-do list and just do this one thing until completion, then move on to the next, then the next. When you hear impatience, you usually tend to think, ew, yucky, bad. And that's a very understandable reaction. However, despite everything we have discussed so far, being patient all the time is not a virtue. Although impatience continually proves either pointless or destructive, it would be pretty unfair if we just label impatience as the big bad. Consider a case of a medical emergency. Daniel and Samuel are two friends at a restaurant enjoying a meal. Now, Daniel wanted to break the record for the most chicken nuggets eaten, so he ordered an ungodly amount of chicken nuggets and started eating. Samuel was shocked and speechless as he watched his friend swallow truckloads of chicken nuggets. Eventually, on his 97th nugget, Daniel falls over, showing signs of medical emergency. Samuel quickly gets to his feet and runs out of the building to avoid the check along with the hospital bill. Here, impatience plays a significant role as Samuel sees a window to escape the mess that he has gotten himself into and leave his wallet unscathed. Samuel is a terrible friend. On the other hand, the customers there did their best to help Daniel. In this case, due to impatience of the customers, Daniel's life was saved. Quick and immediate intervention took place. Emergency services were called and they saved Daniel just in time. Had the customers been patient throughout the whole thing, they would have taken longer to act, thus risking Daniel's life. Impatience in seeking help and taking immediate action can be a life-saving response in any situation. However, it is important to note that this is one of the very few cases where impatience can actually be beneficial, if not the only case. While patience is generally a positive trait, being overly patient can screw you over big time. You'll often find yourself tolerating unacceptable situations a lot of the time. A good example would be a friend who is always late. Despite their constant delays, you always brush it off with a laugh. One day you find yourself at a restaurant having memorized the entire menu and befriended the waitstaff while waiting. In such moments, it becomes essential to strike a balance. Evaluate if your patience is hindering your well-being, which it is, by wasting your time. Then you'll want to establish boundaries, because if you have become better friends with the waitstaff than your friend, then something is probably wrong. Another good example of being overly patient would be in a group project situation. Imagine you're in a group project and one classmate is consistently procrastinating or contributing very little. If you find yourself doing the majority of the work with a smile, cracking jokes about it being a one-person show, then something is clearly wrong and there is a lot to address and confront your classmate about. I would like to end things off by going over some of the biggest misconceptions about patience, starting with passivity. One common misconception is that patience equates to passivity or inaction. In reality, patient individuals can be proactive and persistent while maintaining a calm and composed demeanor. It is not about being passive and enduring. It is about taking the time to assess the situation and conclude what the best way to act is and act accordingly. Then we have indifference. Patience is often misunderstood as being indifferent or accepting any situation without a desire for improvement. Now, true patience involves actively managing challenges while maintaining a positive and composed attitude. It is more about being tranquil and not allowing the impulse responses to take over, acting with rationality more than emotion. And lastly, we have instant mastery. Some people mistakenly believe that patient individuals are naturally gifted with enduring patience. Patience is a skill that can be developed through practice, self-awareness, and a willingness to learn. It is not something that you are born with, and it is not something that people just are. It is something like a muscle. You just have to keep on training it, and eventually it'll be strong. With that, our exploration of patience comes to an end. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if new, and I'll see you in the next one.